Good morning and welcome to worship. My name is Reverend Ross Baker, and I'm the pastor at Eudora United Methodist and Lawrence Centenary United Methodist Church, and I'm here again with Reverend Amanda Baker, the pastor here at Baldwin First United Methodist, and that is where we are today. It's wonderful to welcome you to worship, and as we begin this time this morning, would invite you to take a moment and look at these announcements as they pertain to our different congregations.
All through our summer, we're gearing our worship around your requests with a series we're calling Total Request Live-ish, recalling our younger days. We've gathered songs and scriptures from our community that hold meaning or possibly confusion, and taking time to explore them together. This week, we turn to the Gospel of Mark as we focus on Jesus' healing of the paralytic man at Capernaum.
At this time, I invite you to gather your heartstone if you happen to have that near you, and join with me in this repeat after me prayer. We have gathered from different places.
We have gathered from different places.
How good it is to worship in unity.
How good it is to worship in unity.
We have come from different occupations and activities.
We have come from different occupations and activities.
How good it is to worship in unity.
How good it is to worship in unity.
We have come as unique individuals.
We have come as unique individuals.
Bound together in the love of Christ.
Bound together in the love of Christ.
How good it is to worship together in unity.
How good it is to worship together in unity. Amen.
Amen.
Invite you to light a candle or in some other way signify the sacred space in your home as we enter into worship together. And let us sing together with joyful hearts, Tell Me the Story of Jesus.
Tell me the stories of Jesus, I love to hear. Things I would ask him to tell me if he were here. Scenes by the wayside, tales of the sea, stories of Jesus, tell them to me. First let me hear how the children stood round his knee, and I shall fancy his blessing resting on me. Words full of kindness, deeds full of grace, all in the love light of Jesus' face. Into the city I'd follow the children's band, waving a branch of the palm tree high in my hand. One of his heralds, yes, I would see,
We are witnesses to the power of drawing together for the sustenance that our bodies and our hearts need. So let us bless our meal by praying this repeat after me prayer. Ever-present God,
Ever-present God,
we gather in your name,
we gather in your name,
invited by Jesus,
invited by Jesus,
bound together with your Spirit,
bound together with your Spirit,
in union with each other,
in union with each other,
feed our bodies and our spirits
feed our bodies and our spirits
with your comforting presence,
with your comforting presence,
so that we might be your comfort to others.
so that we might be your comfort to others.
Bless this food
Bless this food
and break open our hearts.
and break open our hearts.
Bless this drink
Bless this drink
and pour out your love.
and pour out your love.
Amen.
Amen.
And now I invite you to pick up a plate of food or a cup of drink on the table, and let us say the one word that is at the heart of the matter in every blessing we do at our tables, repeating after me. Grateful.
Grateful.
Let us begin to break bread while we break open the word in our scriptures.
What would you do if the roof above you opened up while listening Sunday morning to the sermon? This is the very question some might seek out as we hear the story of healing as a man is lowered down from the roof to Jesus while he is speaking in the small town of Capernaum. If Jesus had not caught the attention of religious officials by this point, he has now, as Jesus himself calls out several of these leaders because they question his ability to offer forgiveness instead of God. A story of faith, care of neighbor, and finding a new life in Christ. Hear these words from Mark 2.
After a few days, Jesus went back to Capernaum, and people heard that he was at home. So many gathered that there was no longer space, not even near the door. Jesus was speaking the word to them, and some people arrived, and 4 of them were bringing to him a man who was paralyzed. They couldn't carry him through the crowd, so they tore off part of the roof above where Jesus was. When they had made an opening, they lowered the mat on which the paralyzed man was lying. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Child, your sins are forgiven." Some legal experts were sitting there, muttering among themselves, "Why does he speak this way? He's insulting God. Only the one God can forgive sins." Jesus immediately recognized what they were discussing, and he said to them, "Why do you fill your minds with these questions? Which is easier, to say to a paralyzed person, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your bed, and walk'? But so you will know that the human one has authority on the earth to forgive sins." He said to the man who was paralyzed, "Get up, take your mat, and go home." Jesus raised him up, and right away he picked up his mat and walked out in front of everybody. They were all amazed and praised God, saying, "We've never seen anything like this."
The inspiration for our worship service today is the biblical story of Jesus healing the paralyzed man in his hometown of Capernaum. At the request of Marnie Penrod, a member of Lawrence Centenary UMC, Marnie shares that this particular story interests her because the man's friends go to such lengths to help him get to Jesus. It isn't just the person reaching out to Jesus for their own needs. In a time when we too are called to be even more mindful of care for our neighbor, this text serves as an important reminder of what it is to place our trust back in Jesus while caring for our neighbor. Yes, even when others around us are quick to question our motives. Here are a few questions for conversation this week.
The first question is, can you think of a time in your life when you really couldn't bring yourself to Jesus and you needed someone else to carry you? Who were those folks for you? The second question being, how are we or I called to help others experience Jesus? How is this being lived out? And finally, there's one commentator that shares that a portion of this text within Mark's gospel is not only a struggle for religious officials to stand with Jesus, but it's also a struggle for the disciples as well. What has been a moment for you when you have struggled to stand with Jesus? Well, Amanda, this first question, a time in your life when you really couldn't bring yourself to Jesus and, you needed someone else to carry you. And who have been some of those folks for you?
I've had several different times in my life when I didn't feel particularly close to God or close to Jesus. and needed the support and the surrounding of the Christian community to sort of bring me into that. And some of those were just because of developmental stages and questions that I was beginning to have, and seeing, in those cases, seeing people who were thoughtful and had questions of their own and showed the example of what it was to sort of live in the mystery of not knowing all of it and being okay with that. Just proximity to them and their vulnerability and sharing that piece of their faith was part of what it took for me. And particularly, I was one of those confirmands who came through confirmation with a lot of questions about how it all worked and how to rectify science and faith in God and all of these things together. And I was very fortunate to be part of a confirmation class that was taught not just by my dad, but also by some of his colleagues who were able to sort of talk through that in very honest ways with me, in ways that I probably wouldn't have been comfortable talking to my own dad about. And the other, of course, is when I was very sick after James was born. There was no energy or margin for trying to figure out how to build a spiritual life when the whole world ran around the schedule of when I needed meds and the schedule of when wounds needed cared for and other things had to be taken care of. And then I had a newborn baby who also needed diaper changes and bottles and all of that kind of stuff. There was just no space for thinking about what was my spiritual life going to look like. And it certainly didn't look like going to church. Because that was just too much to do on Sunday morning and too much to be around people and their germs and all of that. But our community at seminary brought that community from a long distance, 13 hours away. But I rarely went a whole week without a phone call, a text, a Facebook message, a Caring Bridge message, a note, a care package, something reaching out and just saying, we're still with you. We haven't forgotten you. We miss you. We want you to be part. We can't wait for you to come back. All those kinds of things. They sort of took that place for a while so that when things slowed down, when I wasn't having to take meds every 4 hours, when I was able to care for myself and the baby at the same time, I had people to turn to while I then sorted out what it meant to have been through this major illness and how it had impacted my faith. So that community was strong. And I think of those people holding the corners of the mat for me. I really do. And that included the bishop in residence at our seminary. And those are just, it's hard to put into words what it's like to get prayer shawls and baby blankets and it followed me, right? So after I got better, you got appointed to Plainfield, Illinois, and they were gracious and found a way to create an internship for me so that I didn't have to commute to a third place during my last year of school. And they had been praying for me because the senior pastor there had been one of your professors. And then I took my first appointment in Kansas, and we came back and went into ministry. And one of our friends from seminary, her mom was on staff at this church that I ended up working at. And so I found out they had been praying for me. All these people that I didn't know had been part of that journey with me even before I knew them. And so that was this incredible bridge as I sort of made that weird transition from having been so sick to really enjoying life at its fullest. And I really credit the ability to make that shift in a way that strengthened my faith with having had all of those people clinging to the mat along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, for myself, I think certainly to my confirmation mentor, wonderful woman that I had grown up knowing, a good friend of my grandparents. And I grew up in the church that my mom actually attended when she was growing up as a child. So it was a unique situation, the fact that I was third generation in this church. And I was not a PK, but there were times where I felt I almost was a PK because I was at church almost just as much in many ways, between children and then youth choir and then, youth group and then, of course, Sunday mornings and things of that sort. But Wanda Bell will forever be one. And she's, of course, a part of the great cloud of witnesses now. Just such a sweet woman that exuded love. And Amanda's smiling because, of course, she knew Wanda very well as well. And she got the chance to actually then serve as a staff member for just under a year at Woodland.
And Wanda's care for young people was so strong. And,
yes.
she was, I'm smiling because Wanda used to slip me envelopes of money to buy snacks for the youth when I was working as a youth leader. That was... I'd see Wanda coming at me with a twinkle in her eye, and I knew she had snack money for the youth. Yeah,
her care for children and youth, was something that was a part of who she was, and a gift she gave back to, I think, generations of children and youth in that church. But then, I think too, I was involved in a group in high school that, really helped. High school is that time where you're really trying to figure out a lot of things. Well, I had been confirmed back in 8th grade. There's still that's not, the end point at which you don't ever, struggle with your faith again, because there's still a lot of unanswered questions and really kind of defining for yourself what your spiritual journey is going to be. And then, I move into college and, worship outreach was huge for me. That was kind of my one constant, even as I wrestled with God numerous times, deciding where in life I was going to go with my vocation. And it was the leadership and the students and my friends that really helped see me through that time. And of course, seminary. One of the things that immediately drew me to Garrett Evangelical when I first stepped foot on the campus there was that incredible sense of family and the close-knit nature that had, been created there, not in an artificial way by any means, but just something you experienced when you walked onto the campus of Garrett Evangelical in the suburbs of Chicago. And, as Amanda said, they were there for me, and many of them, as I've spoken about before, were quick to step up. After James was born, and then of course as we ended up back in Kansas for what we thought was going to be a week, and then it ended up being much longer, and I started commuting back and forth, every couple of weekends to be back in Kansas to see James and Amanda for long weekend periods of time, and then I would travel back and as I was trying to complete my last year of seminary, and all of those folks, and then as Amanda said, Plainfield UMC was that great gift. For us. And we have also had a good friend that served in the other United Methodist church in town as well.
Yes.
And actually she and her husband went and greeted our moving truck when it showed up at our doorstep in Plainfield because we were still trying to quickly clean up behind the moving crew.
And then we got stuck in Chicago traffic.
In our apartment in Chicago. So, we've had numerous friends over and over again that have stepped in to be those mat bearers and carriers for us that have allowed us to, continue on, and folks that have continued to be a part of not only our lives, but now the lives of our children as well.
So the next question then, it becomes, how are we called to help others experience Jesus, and how do we see it being lived out?
I think trying to create, of course, intentional places and ways in which people can experience Jesus. In my over 12 or so years of ministry now, I started out our first appointment was a co-pastoring together. We worked a little bit with youth there, which was really fun. We actually taught our first confirmation program there at Ingleside United Methodist. And, but then from there, after I graduated from seminary, I served out in Plainfield and I worked intentionally with youth again. Middle and high school youth, there's a lot of, struggles and things they are going through. And so trying to be really intentional about how we created a place and a time for people to experience Jesus in their own way. And I think as a pastor, that's part of my calling is attempting to create what seems as natural as possible of an environment and a place for people to potentially experience Jesus. And that's both something that's going to happen within a communal setting, within this body of believers, within our faith community. But it's also something, creating and giving, challenging people to, of course, those spiritual disciplines as well. And that's that personal relationship that has to happen. I think these last 3 or 4 months have been a great, challenge to many of us pastors as we have continued to seek out creative ways on how is it that we can, continue to guide our parishioners, the flock that we are being called to lead alongside Jesus. How can we help our parishioners still continue to experience that? I've been encouraged as I've heard people talk about, where they've seen God, how they've been experiencing God, how maybe they've been living out their faith life in ways that maybe were very different than, what they have done before. I think that will continue to be my calling. That's in, that distance relationship, but still, calling and checking in on people. We've continued to offer our food distribution once a month and just had to be really extra intentional about all of the other health measures we can take to do that. We helped serve food for about a week in Eudora with the summer meal program with Feeding Eudora. The clothing ministry with Bird's Nest in Eudora has continued on. And is getting geared up. And now as we look to that connection to schools, how can we, serve to collect some of those school items in a slightly different way as the school year starts back up. So, my greatest challenge as a pastor, one of them is seeing how I can continue to offer opportunity for people to experience Jesus. And that may be in creation, out in nature as well. So that's going to look different for every person.
Yeah. And I think, you kind of hit on, there's a level of really calling us in this moment to be aware of access to real physical needs for those at the margin. And that's such a part of the heart of this story, right, is that we have this man who, just like everybody else, is pressing in to see Jesus for healing, right? The whole crowd has all come for healing.
He can't make it there. He can't make it.
But he can't get through the crowd, and he can't navigate all the barriers that are holding him back. And so the friends sort of find a way around the barriers by way of the roof to lower him right into the midst of what Jesus is doing. And there are so many places right now where access is an issue. And for the church to be thinking, where can we peel off the roof? Where can we make a way for folks to have the things that they physically need as well as spiritually? Right. How do we make sure that every kid who either is remote schooling or gets sent home on quarantine or is doing a hybrid model has access to the food that they need every day? And we've got the great summer lunch program, and I have deep faith that we'll be hearing from the school district's food program soon about how that's all going to work for kids who rely on that food. But we can be part of that, right? It doesn't have to be something that the church puts its stamp on and says this is ours.
Sure.
We can work with the structures that exist and be partners with trying to make those access roads, the internet access we've been talking about,
technology and computers.
Technology, but then there's also, how do we make sure that every kid has access to the opportunity to see somebody that cares about them read them a story?
Right.
How do we make sure that that families that are stretched to the very limit have some place that they can talk about what's hard right now, as they juggle too many demands and responsibilities? Where are we making space for teachers and educators to talk about both their absolute devotion to their students and their dedication to doing everything as safely as possible, and their lingering fears that it won't be enough for them, for their families, for their students? How can we make space for those things as a way of creating access to Christ's healing and mercy and justice? And so those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. And some of it for me just has to do with I have always felt a particular call to being sort of publicly vulnerable, right? Sharing that the road of faith is not always easy for me in a way that I hope allows others to feel like they're not held back by a barrier of needing to be perfect or needing to perform Christianity in a certain way. That if the pastor can sit or stand and say, this is really hard, and it's not always sunshine and rainbows, that can pull down some of those barriers or peel back the roof so that they can feel like they're in Christ's presence.
Which brings us then around to this final question for today. And I'm sure, this text, there's so much in it that, you could create a whole page worth of questions. But, this idea that, this particular text, and, remember, folks, this is right at the beginning of chapter 2. We're not hardly into the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus is hardly into his public and professional ministry, teaching and leading and healing, and he's already, beginning to stir the waters.
Jesus in Mark is not afraid of conflict.
He's not. And that's really kind of a common theme, you could find throughout. And, he's constantly looking. It's not that he's, I think, seeking out ways to cause
the
fights.
Harry Potter quote, I don't go looking for trouble, it just finds me.
It just finds me. I think that could very much be lived out here. But, you would say that, of course, the religious officials, they're already beginning to get a little bit uncomfortable. And we don't want to just bash the religious officials. Many of these were very devout, people of faith that felt very strongly about what it is that they believed and why they believed it. And, you could say the disciples were also in that place. They obviously were still early on in following Jesus, but, they're still trying to, in many ways, figure out what Jesus was doing and how he was going about living out his life. So the question is then, what have been those moments for us where maybe we have struggled in our faith, and maybe it's based off of something that we've read. Maybe it's been, a part of a small group or something that we've been a part of where, maybe there's disagreement or conflict about, what we believe versus what other people believe. And, for me as a pastor, of course, there have been numerous times where I've been, in a room where something's said and it might make me a little bit uncomfortable because, one of the beauties of the United Methodist Church is that we have people that, theologically believe a wide range of things. And that gets back to biblical and scriptural interpretation and other things as well. So,
well, and even not just what others have said, but sometimes what Jesus says makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, sure.
I joked in one of the sermons that I gave in seminary about, Jesus has this saying that we like to quote about, if you have 2 cloaks, you are expected to give one away. And that's all well and good while we're talking about ancient cloaks. But please don't go in my coat closet. We went to seminary in Chicago and I was like, well, how specific are we going to get about this? Because my coats are different. I have a parka and a pea coat and a fall jacket. And does Jesus mean that I have to choose one of those, or do I get to keep one for each season? And wealth in particular, right? There's a lot that Jesus says about money and possessions and
material stuff,
and our relationship to it that I become very uncomfortable with. And Jesus says, sell all your stuff and come follow me. But as anybody who's been on the moving crew for us as itinerant preachers knows, we have not gotten rid of all of our stuff in order to follow Jesus. No. And in fact, we have an overabundance of stuff.
We do.
I always say, I don't know how it is that we get rid of so much every time we move and still have so much.
Yeah. Moving into different sizes, you get rid of something and then you moved into a different size home and all of a sudden
acquire
you
new things and
or feel like you need it. Yeah.
And so, there's a lot that Jesus says about wealth and possessions that makes me uncomfortable. There are things that Jesus says about how we are called to forgive that at times make me uncomfortable. It's hard for me there's that part of you that wants to go, well, but Jesus, what about?
Yeah.
Surely you don't mean this scenario. It can be hard. It can be hard. And I think, the disciples may have been in one of those moments in this story too.
Yeah. Well, and I thinking back to Chicago as well, but living in Chicago, we're in a variety of neighborhoods. All the time. We lived in one of the most diverse neighborhoods as far as how many different languages from all over the world were spoken in kind of one place, one neighborhood in Chicago. We constantly, would be walking down a sidewalk and somebody would approach us, seeking out assistance with this or that. And, there did become that inner struggle. And there were a few times where, there may have been a little bit more of advantage, not that the people were seeking out to take advantage of me, but they maybe went above and beyond what, when we initially were offering something, then they said, oh, well, maybe I'll try to add on this and this and this. I think back to the material possessions piece that you talk about, Amanda, thinking to, some of the gospel texts that talk about, when did you go and visit the person in prison? When did you you give away this? When did you do? When did you assist those on the margins or the sick or the hurting? And each time that Jesus says that, in some ways I'm saying, oh yeah, well I haven't done that at times, and I haven't always gone and stood on the the picket lines or those moments where, I could be a visible voice in this case or that case. And so it gets back to the fact that, we're all human. We're all not perfect. And, we're trying to live out our faith journeys as best as we can, knowing that we're not always going to get it right. And at the same time, I do think that Jesus is constantly calling us to be aware of how it is that we live. And that's regardless of if you call yourself a follower of Christ or not. So I think that is certainly a great challenge. And I think that's a similar case that the disciples were in within our story today. I think it's very interesting that the text, kind of calls attention. Jesus initially notices these friends and certainly the faith and the trust that these friends were placing in Jesus, someone they may or may not have known very well, to come and bring this man that was not going to be able to come and be at the feet of Jesus without, that lowering of this man, and willingness to put themselves out on the line, and willingness to live out, put themselves forward in front of this large group of people, not knowing what kind of result might come out of this.
And I think, in the end, I find great joy that even when I struggle with what Jesus says and does, that we can picture ourselves in the place of the man lowered through the roof,
right?
Receiving those words of forgiveness and healing. That in the end, compassion wins, love wins.
Amen. Yeah.
That the point of drawing close to Jesus is that Jesus has healing and forgiveness to offer.
Amen.
And so even when it's hard to take, I take joy and thanksgiving in that.
And there's some good news in that. Absolutely.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, watches me. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when song gives place to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From care he sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me.
It is difficult in the moment not to be near some of the people we love and might be worried about. So I invite you to take a moment and say out loud or place in the chat or comment box the name of people you wish were right there next to you at the table today. And as we name them, they are present with us in our hearts. We also want to take a moment to lift up names from our communities as we lift them up in prayer today. We'll lift up prayers for Glenn, Bill, Aaliyah, Matt, John, Nick, Nicole, Chris, Sean, Michael, Elise, Ashley, for those affected by natural disasters, and for our educators, students, and their families.
God, we pray for Carol, Luis, Mark, Dawn, for Marve's mother and Gary's mother, for Navia, Haley, Nick, Kim, Ryan, Leo, Marshall, for Ron and Ginger, Linda, Shorty, Tom and Suanne, Tim, Tisha, Janet, Judith, Ruth, Blake, Cody, Abram, and Tinley. As we name these, our friends, our family, our neighbors, and coworkers, we also lift up those we cannot name, those whose names we do not know, but we know that they need our prayers and God's comfort. We pray for those who have lost loved ones, for those who are sick and recovering, for those who are caring for loved ones who are sick at home, for those who are caring for persons in medical care, for those who are separated from loved ones, for those who are feeling alone and isolated, for those who are helping and are so very tired, for those who are struggling to find friends and food and comfort, for those who are afraid and those who suffer acts of injustice and oppression, for peace throughout your world, and for students, parents, and educators. And hear us as we join our voices together, praying as Christ taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
At this time, I invite you to stand up wherever you are and join with the praise band from Baldwin First as we sing together Our God by Chris Tomlin.
1, 2, 3, 4. Water you turned into wine, open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you, there's none like you. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, there's none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God, yeah. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? If our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? What could stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? What could stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God.
Relationships are a vital lifeline that can bring us into Christ's presence in our time of deep need. What relationships in your life could use tending and care this week? We invite you to reach out by phone or note or text and strengthen those ties this week. God may use you to bring another nearer to Christ's mercy, or it may happen the other way around.
And hear this benediction. Jesus' love and compassion has been poured out for you today. Go into the world in confidence, bearing forgiveness and love for all God's people. Go in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Like and subscribe and hit the bell button. Like and subscribe and hit the bell button.
Like and subscribe and hit the bell button.
That's really what...